Welcome to the 2026 Higher Education Climate Leadership Summit. Please welcome to the stage, Tim Carter, President, Second Nature.
Debí tirar más fotos de cuando te tuve. Debí darte más besos y abrazos las veces que pude. Ey, ojalá que los míos nunca se muden.
Who knows this tune? No Bad Bunny fans? Yeah, come on! You gotta have some good walk-up music. That's always critical. Good morning and welcome to the summit. We are thrilled to be here with you for 2 days of connecting and reconnecting. Hopefully everyone had a good time at the reception last night, and thank you to our Chicago host for bringing us the weather that we have. We can't beat it for March. Most of us are not from Chicago, so we must start by acknowledging we're gathered on the traditional ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe peoples, and this includes the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi nations. And for many of us, the place we call home is on land that was also forcibly taken from people and nations who were there long before we were. And we have a responsibility and we have agency to work towards restoration and justice in what we say and what we do. So centering justice and equity is a core commitment of Second Nature, and we have written down how we are putting these justice principles into practice here at the summit. I don't expect everyone to read all these, but we will send this around on our app, and you'll be able to really take note, and we really want people to take this seriously and put it into practice over the next 2 days. We also put our money where our mouth is. So once again, this year we created an equity scholarship fund, which supports conference attendees who identify as Black, Indigenous, or a person of color. And new for this year, we created a community college fund to help support attendees from community colleges. Second Nature. Thank you. Second Nature contributed $25,000, and we're really thankful for our donors and philanthropic partners such as Chris Nelson, the Lemelson Foundation, and the Lumina Foundation, who help provide funds to support 25 conference attendees. So we're really grateful for that. A few quick logistics before I get into my opening remarks. Our engagement hub is right across from registration outside in the foyer. Hopefully y'all saw that when you came in. We really want you to connect with our staff there, learn about membership with us, and share your feedback. It's really critical when we're in person together to take advantage of these in-person times. I'm an extrovert, so the next 2 days are actually invigorating for me, but I know many of you are not, or some of you might not be, and the thought of talking, constantly for 2 days causes you to break out into hives. And if that's the case, let us know, and we'll find some quiet space for you if you need a quiet room. As noted, we use Whova, the app, pretty extensively for announcements, and we have engagement tools there. We have a photo contest, actually. I don't know how many more sunrise photos we're going to have, but the sunrises have been amazing. If you upload any photos you have with conference attendees or the experiences you've had when you're here in Chicago, we're going to take the best photo, and you'll win a complimentary registration to next year's summit. Thank you to our sponsors and partners. You've seen the slides as you came in. The next room is actually a place where you can engage with many of those folks. And a particular thanks to the Summit Program Advisory Committee, whose Chicago area connections and programming guidance really made this event what it is. It's invaluable to have local connections when we put on events in new places that we're not familiar with. And I lastly want to acknowledge and thank the Second Nature Board of Directors and Second Nature staff who makes all of this possible. If you're in the room and you're a staff member or a board member, could you stand? Yeah, let's give them. If you've put on events, you know how much work goes into the back end to make it look like no work goes into these sorts of things. So really grateful for the staff and the board's leadership. So we're here at a seminal moment for the Climate Leadership Network. We're 20 years into the President's climate leadership commitments. So think about what you were doing 20 years ago in March of 2006. I actually met some people who probably weren't alive in March of 2006. And myself, my second child was being born in March of 2006. So think about where you were in March of 2006, and I'm going to read some headlines. Ang Lee wins the Oscar for Best Director of Brokeback Mountain. George Mason, who here's from George Mason? We got some Masonites, right? Yep. George Mason made an improbable underdog run to the NCAA Final Four. I'm sure you all remember that. There you go. Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth was just starting to get buzz as he was promoting it ahead of the May release. Doesn't that seem like a lifetime ago when Inconvenient Truth came out? And one other thing that at that time didn't garnish much attention was this. This is the first ever tweet. And nobody in March of 2006 could have mapped what Jack Dorsey's tweet would mean for the world. So that's the thing about history. When we think about history, there are things that feel momentous that often just become a blip in the radar. And there are some things that seem trivial that end up changing everything. So I've been thinking a lot about our history, given we're at the 20-year mark, and where we fall in this blip to revolutionary kind of spectrum. Many of the sustainability positions and offices that we now take for granted in higher education can be directly traced to the climate commitments that were started in 2006. A campaign that began at 12 institutions quickly expanded to hundreds, and we can find dotted line influences now to work taking place across thousands of institutions all over the world. So that's not a blip, that's real, transformative, sector-shaping innovation. But, there's always a but, we have not arrived. And as Prime Minister Mark Carney recently said, nostalgia is not a strategy. The climate challenge is not solved. In many ways, it's grown. The goalposts move as science advances and society demands more. And a year ago, none of us could fully have anticipated the degree to which we find ourselves and climate in the government's crosshairs. Attacks designed to sow chaos, create uncertainty, and erode public trust in our institutions. And this is what makes this moment so important. The public is watching and they believe in us. We did a study with Ohio State this past year, and 67% of the respondents across the political spectrum said higher education's climate work is very important. 61% said they're very concerned about their children's future. And a third said higher education's not doing enough. And the key variable that mattered in this survey was trust. Trust in higher education. 78% rated our climate work is important if they had high trust in higher education. And only 54% rated our work as very important if they had low trust in higher education. So the public's not walking away, they're asking us to step up, and they're asking us to build trust with them. The more trust they have, the more they expect out of us. The systems and structures and programs that we thought were best at a given moment of time, whether it was 20 years ago or 1 year ago, need to be calibrated with this current moment and anticipate the inevitably uncertain future. So we've probably all heard the word headwinds that are being used this past year. I've used it a lot myself. And I was thinking about it a few weeks ago and wrote a little LinkedIn piece about it where, you know, I think we've been thinking about headwinds all wrong. Headwinds are bad at cruising altitude. When you're up, you know, like you're kicked back with your drink, you got your movie on, 30,000 feet, and it's slowing you down to get to your destination. But if you ask any pilot and you talk to them about what headwinds mean, they're an enormous advantage during takeoff. They increase lift, they shorten the runway. At the most critical moment of flight, they're an accelerant. So the question I want to put before all of us is, what if these current headwinds are exactly what we need to really get airborne? So at Second Nature, we see a major opportunity for liftoff through sector unification. Right now, when distrust is being manufactured at scale and higher education is under coordinated attack, unification is not just a nice idea, it's a strategic necessity. We all know unification is not uniformity. It's not asking everyone to look the same or do the same thing. It's saying that regardless of your institution type, regardless of your role, regardless of your geography, you belong in this effort, and your specific version of leadership matters to the whole. Community college brings something that a research university can't, and a rural institution sees things that urban ones miss. It's not a weakness in the network, it's actually the whole point. We need each other, and we always have. So the question is whether we can organize around that truth. And our call to action today is simple. It's Unify for Climate. Unify for Climate is our strategic approach to align higher education around sector-wide climate solutions with measurable social impact. And on the programming side, Unify for Climate starts with two primary actions that we're launching today. The first is a new Climate Milestones program. And this is built with input over the past 4 years with all of you and designed to work seamlessly with your existing institutional commitments. And we're really pleased to be working with partners such as ASHE and the Carnegie elective folks to see that the milestones don't add unnecessary burdens to reporting or your workflow. We really are emphasizing the importance of integration across these initiatives. The second part of Unify for Climate is that there will be updated science-aligned guidance that makes progress easier to track, compare, and communicate. So both are designed so your institutions can move individually faster and we can demonstrate what higher education can achieve together. It creates diverse institutional entry points to our network, so those of you who may have strengths in areas beyond decarbonization may want to get involved, and there's leadership opportunities there. You can join us and express your specific version of leadership without lowering any collective expectation. No single institution can lead sector-wide unification alone. That's our job, and as a network organization with a deep history, we're taking that seriously. Unify for Climate is our first programmatic step. In our board meeting this week, we're going to be discussing how unification can be something that spans not just our programs, but operates as a strategic principle for the organization. This week, we have Second Nature-led sessions dedicated to Unify for Climate on the milestones, the guidance, and putting it into practice. So our staff's ready to dig in with you. We want to have those conversations. But we look for unification also showing up everywhere. So in the sessions that you're a part of, the sessions that you participate in, think of this as a unification moment. What does it mean to hear from a long-standing leader and you're thinking, well, that's not me, I just got this job 6 months ago. How do I fit in? Well, that's exactly the unification moment we're talking about. What fresh perspective do you bring to someone who's been doing it forever? And if you've been doing it forever, how do you mentor the next generation of leaders coming through? All of us have had some experience with that, and we need to work on this together. And so that's the approach we should be taking in all of the sessions, not just the ones dedicated to this program. Sector-wide success and progress takes all of us, and Unify for Climate is how we'll start building that together, even in small ways over the next couple of days. So let's use these headwinds. Let's take off together. Let's unify for climate. Welcome to the summit. Thanks so much.
Please welcome our first panel to the stage. Jonathan Koppell, Justin Schwartz, Joanie Mahoney, and Cynthia Larive.
This was Chancellor Schwartz walk-up music, by the way.
No. I would have gone with Tupac myself.
Oh, nice. Well, we're very excited. So first of all, many of you might have looked at the program a few days ago and saw Rachel Hodgson, who was supposed to be moderating this panel. Unfortunately, Rachel has COVID right now and is unable to make it. So I am a deeply lowered second version of what Rachel could possibly be doing here. But we are really thrilled to have a panel of presidents who can reflect on and help us think about what this current and future work will look like. So we're part of this 20-year theme. We want to say, okay, presidents who have been around for a while or been in this space for a while, and presidents who are kind of newly entering this space, what does it look like for them to be thinking about climate leadership in this moment? So we're really thrilled to have you all join us. I actually wanted to start, Jonathan Holloway used to be the president of Rutgers University, and he had a quote where he said, when the presidency turns into an abstraction, then people can say whatever you want. If you're just the president and you're not a human being, then people can say whatever they want about you. So we're going to do a little quick down the line, and I'm going to start with each of you first with some personal stuff. Okay, so get the juices flowing. What's your breakfast of champions?
Well, after the second cup of coffee, it's usually eggs and dry wheat toast.
Nice.
Yeah. And my good friend Jonathan's right, but on the other hand, in today's era, it doesn't matter if they know you. They'll say whatever they want.
Regardless.
I'm an oatmeal and blueberries for breakfast.
Coffee first, and then yogurt and berries.
I have a banana coconut protein spinach smoothie, which makes my kids barf, but that's what I eat.
Maybe you can find the place where we can find those smoothies here. Okay, second question. Jody, we're going to start with you.
Okay.
What's on your current must-read list?
Well, can I do two? Because we're here, I want to draw everybody's attention to the Nature Report, which is out and looking for comments right now. But the book that I recently finished that I love is A Gentleman in Moscow. If you haven't read it, it's set in the Russian Revolution, and it goes over, it's a historical fiction, great story. There's a mini series on Netflix, I think, so if you don't want to read the whole book, but I loved the book.
Nice. Cindy?
So at Santa Cruz, we have every spring the Deep Read, where the whole community reads the same book, and this year's book is Entangled Life, and it's about fungal networks. It's by Merlin Sheldrake, and I think that's a really interesting thing to be thinking about right now.
Our chemist goes with the fungi. Nice.
But not the ridiculous interstellar fungal network on Star Trek.
Not yet.
It's just appalling. Anyway, so I'm excited this question because I've been proselytizing of this book called A Brief History of Intelligence, which is a fantastic book about the evolution of human intelligence, but how the development of artificial intelligence is helping us understand human intelligence as well. Read it today.
All right, Justin.
Well, I've got about 300 emails waiting, and then currently in the middle of the book, and I'm embarrassingly blanking on the title, that's a historical book about the professional baseball players who trained in the early 40s at Chapel Hill to become fighter pilots, like Ted Williams and others.
Great. Well, someone can do the research on what the title is. Yeah, send it out over the Hoover app. All right. Cindy, if you go back to the start of your career, what's one thing you would do differently?
And when I was in high school, my mother really wanted me to take typing. And I said, I'm going to be a chemist. I'm not going to spend my time typing. Oh, was I wrong?
Not to be in a hurry. I was so eager to get started. I wish, my biggest regret is that I didn't do something like Peace Corps after college, but I was so eager to yeah. See, I don't get to say that. but I was just eager to get going and worried about time, and that was a mistake.
Yeah, plus one on the eager to get going, and for me the unintended consequence of that was not networking and getting to know people in disciplines far disparate from my own.
Yeah, so go ahead, Jim.
And I would say that the longer my career goes, the less I feel like I know. And if I could go back to the beginning, I would ask a lot more questions and be a lot more open to other people's solutions. I thought I knew more than I did in the beginning.
My kids would agree, the longer I go, the less I know.
Curiosity is a big part of this, yeah. Okay, last question. Jonathan, we'll start with you. What's something someone might be surprised to learn about you?
I guess that people think I'm really serious and intense. But I actually like to laugh a lot like that. And I make jokes, so people know it, but I actually like to laugh at other things, and I think people don't realize that.
We'll hold you to that.
I have 6 tattoos.
6 tattoos? Okay, we won't ask to reveal them, but that's amazing.
As long as I know you're not asking, I will say I know all the words to Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang.
Oh, that is incredible.
I just don't find that surprising.
You don't?
No, because I do too.
So I grew up in Deadwood, South Dakota, and if any of you saw the HBO series, you probably know I have a vocabulary that matches some of the language in that series, but choose not to use it.
Nice. Well, I think it's helpful to understand many of you are not college presidents, many of you are not chancellors of universities, but there are people, they're real people with real feelings and ideas and creativity, and they came from a history. We all come from somewhere. So really nice. Thank you all for being candid about that. And it kind of translates into the more substantive questions we want to get into, which is how can we, in this space, in this moment, really be not the glossy version of what higher ed is, but the honest version of what higher ed is. And what can we do on the climate leadership side now in ways that is different than 20 years ago when we were making pronouncements and people were signing up and we were running campaigns. Like, what does it look like now that the profession has really been professionalized in a lot of sense? I was looking back at our history and understanding that all these offices were started, and now you don't have to start offices. Now you have to help lead offices. And I was actually wanting to start, Joanie, with you and Cindy on this first question, because you're at SUNY ESF. In your title is Environmental Science and Forestry, so there's no way you're going to get around, core mission-aligned work around sustainability and climate. And Cindy, you've been part of the University of California system for a long time and been there before they joined the commitment. So you've seen this long history. Joanie, starting with you, how have you seen kind of this evolution and what does it mean for your leadership now?
Well, I'm here with 2 hats. One is representing Chancellor John King from the SUNY system, and he has made sure that every one of the colleges in the SUNY system has a chief sustainability officer, and we've put a sustainability action plan together at the university at the system level, and we have at ESF. But as you said, I'm at a college where it's wonderful. Everybody is pulling in the same direction to improve our world. So I see a big responsibility being the president of ESF, and I know our students do, to just keep moving forward. We're not necessarily, we do share best practices across the system, but we see it as our responsibility to be leading that effort. And we're
as part of the system, you see responsibility.
Exactly, right. Okay. And our sustainability staff, and I was able to contribute to that system-wide plan because we already had our plan. But we're doing things like mapping our curriculum to the UN sustainability goals. So our students, when they're registering for classes, can see what this correlates with. We've turned our campus, we're a bee-friendly campus. If you come, you'll see in front of the main building, we've turned our lawn into a meadow, and we've gone out and found that there's 106 or 109 species of bees, some of them rare, that have made a home at ESF. And I'm saying this because we just have to keep doing the next thing, because we know that as the Environmental Science College in the system, they're looking to our students and our faculty for ways to put some of the research into action. So that's how I see it today compared to 20 years ago when we were trying to convince people that there was the need for this.
I guess one follow-up to that would be, maybe 20 years ago, was SUNY ESF just an island versus being part of this system where now the chancellor has really made it a priority system-wide?
Yeah, I wasn't at SUNY at the time, but I do know, because I grew up around SUNY and in New York State, if you wanted to be in environmental science, you found ESF. Yeah. Because it wasn't everywhere the way it is now. And it's great that it's everywhere right now, but we have 115 years of history of doing research, and we have data sets that go back that far that can show people what's happened So, you know, we're thrilled that there's more people, but we do feel that responsibility to lead the way.
Yeah. And Cindy, part of UC, but also, you know, at UCSC, you have a long history there. And how's it changed for you?
Well, we benefit a lot, like you, from being part of a system. The University of California system is, I think, the best university system in the world, and we have great colleagues.
I don't know about that.
Oh no, I'm saying it. You know, it's a throwdown.
All opposed?
And so, but we have great colleagues at the Office of the President that really help us as we think across our institutions about planning. And we were founded in 1965, so we're relatively young, but our founding values were social justice and environmental sustainability. And there's a through line through to today around those values. What's changed for us, I think, is the way we approach sustainability and think about climate change. And I think the time has evolved that forces integration. So we often think about integration across disciplines, that's for sure, but to be able to take the climate action that we need to take to be environmentally sustainable, it also means we have to integrate across teaching and research and operations, and also our community partnerships and public service missions. And so as we think about how we bring all those things together, in 2003, we released a new strategic plan, and we had 5 themes. One of those themes was climate, resilience, and sustainability. And an outset of that has been 3 joint academic Senate administrative working groups, climate committees, on teaching and research and operations. And so we're trying to institutionalize that integration.
Great. And so that's great, that long history and your experience at those institutions. And then I wanted to shift just into you and Jonathan, where you're not new personally necessarily, but you're kind of new in these roles, and your institutions aren't necessarily part of large systems, even if you're part of kind of statewide affiliations. Could you maybe start to speak about, in your new role here as a new person leading these efforts, how have you entered into this space that's, you know, Boulder's been really well established in climate science for a long time.
So, so I'm in month 21. But I will say, when I go back and think about when I was considering whether to apply, I had a perfectly wonderful position at Penn State that's very strong in this space also. I see my friend Peter in the room. One of the things that stood out to me in the position description I responded to was a strong affirmation and commitment to sustainability. And I found out later that was actually pushed to the system from the faculty assembly. So the shared governance insisted that be part of it. So for me, that was actually part of the reason that I applied, because it was such a prominent mindset for Boulder. So we're a 4-campus system. We're the flagship. And I remind people, flagship is not a position of oversight or greatness. It means that you have a flag so other people can follow. And so we work across our whole system to advance the ideals. Now, we had a chief sustainability officer on campus, but it was positioned on campus about 3-4 levels down as a great faculty member. And it was focused predominantly on internal operations more than anything else. And so one of the first things I did was to she was preparing to retire, I elevated that position to a vice chancellor level and launched a search. And Andrew's somewhere in the room. Andrew Mayak, where are you? There he is, way over there. So he joined us. And the goal was not to say, Andrew, now you're in charge of everything in sustainability, but to help galvanize everything across the institution, so that our faculty, our staff, and our students know that for us it means decarbonizing campus, but also knowing that if we decarbonize campus and nothing else happened, it wouldn't make a big difference, because we're pretty small compared to the globe. It meant advocating to find ways to do what universities are supposed to do, which is create knowledge, advance knowledge, and disseminate knowledge. And so find the things that we're doing in research distributed across the state and see actually implemented. So we have a student group now that has funding from the state to partner with rural communities to help them transition away from coal. And then it also means leadership in terms of educating our students. There's like 18 to 20 million students in higher education right now in this country. And so I think one of the important things of your goals of uniting us, right, and the Carnegie Foundation criteria in elective criteria in sustainability is to push forward the idea that if we have 18 million students every year being educated in sustainability, over a few years' time, we've now really transformed this mindset across the country, right? So, politicians can't legislate what people care about. And then also seeing, so that the educational piece translating into dissemination, where we think about it not just the individual student, but what they do when they leave. And so trying to take this more holistic approach has really been, I think, very effective. And that's the direction we're going.
That's great. So a few things that pull out of there. That elevation of the role, that's definitely something we've been seeing across the U.S. with these different systems. And then this idea of we're doing things at scale. Maybe it's not just the campus footprint, but our campus footprint is actually much bigger. It's statewide in your case. Jonathan, thoughts on?
So we're a pretty different story. So first of all, not a system, freestanding, second largest university in New Jersey. People don't know that because they're like, what's Montclair State University? But I'm in my 5th year as president. When I got there, we didn't have a sustainability office or a sustainability officer. We have a very good PSC&G Institute for Sustainability Studies with our brand new director somewhere here, Alex, wave. So we have a little bit of a history of doing work, but the institution had no emphasis, no articulation of goals, and that seemed inconsistent with what I thought our hallmark should be as a public serving institution. Yes, we educate people, yes, we do research, but ultimately our mandate is to serve the public interest, and to do that in 2021 when I started, and not be thinking about the environment seemed a huge gap. So for us, over the last few years, it's been articulating that mission, making it something that people understand and embrace, starting to measure our performance by the STARS system, and Ben Kalsher, our sustainability director, is here somewhere, our first sustainability director on campus over there. So it's a little bit of catch-up, and it's a little bit of capturing what people have been doing on an individual basis, which is a lot, but turning it into something that you can articulate as an institutional goal, and to the comments that my colleagues made, something that is part of the learning environment, not just a research question, but how do students get involved? How do they make a difference? I think, frankly, it's grim that Al Gore's movie was 20 years ago. And if you were a student today hearing that, you would be like, wow, so you've been talking about this for a long time and not much has happened. So the question is, how do you infuse students with a sense of optimism that not only can they learn about it, but they can do something about it, and that differences can be made, and that even though there's been a lot of regression or lack of progress, at least over the last 20 years, there has been some progress. So if you're not just educating, but as Justin said, creating that mentality, but also providing a sense that there's agency, then I think you're missing part of the assignment.
So the student focus is kind of a big element. Obviously, everyone has students, and you need to think about the ways the students continue to push your institutional leadership. I guess I want to move a little bit now into this uncertain time. That has good past thinking, but what does it mean to lead now? And particularly in this environment where we've heard about, anticipatory compliance, where we're doing things in advance of something happening. There's a lot of how do we deal with real-world trade-offs in your role, where demands, even from students or from faculty, you got to do more, and then you're sitting there going, well, I don't want to lose Pell funding, I don't want to lose research dollars, I don't want you to lose your job, So I would really love to hear, and maybe Justin, starting with you, I've been hearing a lot about UCAR and kind of other federal facilities that oftentimes have joint relationships to some extent with our higher education institutions. How are you dealing with this leadership moment in such uncertain federal times?
So we reject the idea of pre-compliance. It's just, I'm an engineer by training, but I can be a philosopher too. So it was about 2,000 years ago that Seneca said that we have more anxiety in our minds than in reality. And I totally botched the quote, but that's okay. I don't speak ancient Greek anyways. But the idea that we fear more in our minds rather than what we experience in reality. And so if I reflect back just a year ago, we saw the president's proposed budget. And there was, for obvious reason, a lot of panic around the president's budget. but I think maybe the last president whose budget was actually passed was Monroe. So, now there have been cuts, but nothing to the extent that what was proposed by the president. And so we also, we've been around, this is our 150th year as a university. It's about 4.5 billion plus or minus years as a planet. The administration will be in there for 4 years. And so your wind analogy was much more optimistic than mine. I spent a lot of years in Florida, and you get hurricanes. They will do some damage, and then they're gone, and they don't last very long. And in the broader arc of time, they hit and they go. Now, hopefully, this is a Cat 1, not a Cat 4 or 5, right? We don't want to see Andrew or Katrina again in terms of the analogy. But we also think about in the way we've been looking at the federal funding risk is if we are that sensitive to one funding source, then we need to think more about how we diversify our resources and not be dependent on the federal government. Because to your point about 20 years since Gore, right, we have seen that for all, whether we've had administrations that were strongly in favor of advancing climate solutions and those that were against, even with those who were the strongest in favor, did we make the progress we wanted? And so maybe we need to take the ownership of solving the problem more and be less dependent on federal dollars.
Okay, so this is an interesting discussion. I want us to discuss it. One perspective is hurricane comes through, hurricane's gone. Other perspectives might be different than that. And as a president, you, and Jonathan, I'm wondering if you have a similar idea, but you've done a lot of thinking around the history of democracy and where do you land on this thing?
So at the risk of getting caught up in a metaphor, I guess this is the high school debate guy in me that can't help. Some hurricanes do reshape the land. Yep. And rivers change course and coastlines are eroded. And we're already Cat 4 from my point of view. And the American democracy, and certainly the globe, the global system is not the same and won't be the same, whether it's in 3 years or X number of years. That doesn't mean you don't keep doing what you want to do, but I don't think you can, I think the attitude that says, let's just wait it out, keep our head down, hope that things go back to normal, I just don't think that's going to happen.
So I don't think we keep our head down and wait. I think we keep our head up and charge forward, despite, and to your metaphor, right, to use the headwind.
Yeah, but the question has to be, okay, if the world is now different, how do you operate differently? So I don't believe in pre-compliance. I do believe in listening to what's being said, and we can do the same things. We can be true to our values. We can be true to our principles, and understand how to frame things in a way that broadens out the constituencies that are interested. A lot of the stuff we're talking about is building more resilient infrastructure. And we talked about this a little bit. You can frame that as climate change, or you could frame it as building more resilient infrastructure to survive uncertainty. That's just a broader way to describe something that's fundamentally important. You don't have to even some of the anti-DEI woke stuff. If you listen, if their point is, well, this has to be available to everybody. Okay. I don't have a problem with that. So if you want me to articulate that and say our goal is to make everybody successful, I will articulate it as make everybody successful. And so I don't think that's compromising. I don't think that's bowing your head. I think it's understanding how to achieve success in the world that we operate in. And I don't think there's any merit badge for continuing to say something that is not going to get you to be successful. And I do want to get into some of the trade-offs as you raise that at some point, because that's real.
Yeah.
And to not talk about the trade-offs is to miss the point.
Let's get Cindy and Joanie, your perspectives on this, because it does seem like where you start from a blip, this is a 4-year thing and it'll change, versus the reshaping of the landscape probably does affect your leadership approach. And I think you have found agreement, like we do want to keep our head up and move forward. Cindy, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm aligned with you, I think, on the way that we're thinking and what our campus is doing, and largely led by our Center for Coastal Climate Resilience. If you haven't been to Santa Cruz, you should come visit us. We're in a redwood forest overlooking the Monterey Bay. It's a really beautiful place. But we are pummeled by these winter storms that come to the coast. And our center is really moving us to not think about studying climate change, but to be focused on climate solutions. So it is addressing the impacts and doing so in a solution-oriented way. And so for us, that can mean things like valuing the natural parts of the ecosystem, things like coral reefs and mangroves in certain parts of the world, wetlands on the Central Coast, and fisheries, all of which are important and impacted by climate, but also have economic value. And so being able to value those assets allows you to have conversations with insurance and the World Bank and federal and tribal managers of land, all with the idea of integrating resilience and taking advantage of these nature-based solutions and protecting them. And in that work, communication is really important. And so we see communication not as dissemination, which many organizations do, but as part of implementation. So communicating to our partners in the community-based organizations in city and county and state government, that's all an important way of getting us to right decisions for the future. And so that community engagement is part of our public service mission, but it also means that we have to be able to leverage communications. And one way we do that is through a master's program we have in science communication, which is pretty unique, I think. It brings in students who have an undergraduate degree in the science area, trains them in journalism broadly, and they partner with campus organizations and research partners to learn how to communicate on our campus and then go out into the world to help change the narrative around climate change.
So one thing you brought up here we hadn't talked about is this kind of subnational work, maybe in this moment when the feds might, whether it's for 4 years or fundamentally shifting, there's that builds trust locally. It also creates solutions that people see and affects their real life in a positive way. So Joanie, I don't know if you want to speak to the state of New York SUNY whole thing or just the way ESF is approaching this federal moment.
Well, because we are the College of Environmental Science, we maybe have the luxury of not having to deal with this anticipatory compliance. No one's expecting us to be doing something other than this environmental science work that we're doing. But I want to say that I think you said that the government can't legislate how people feel or what people care about. The students at ESF, so they are passionate about this work. And they, maybe are leaders in this space, but they're pretty representative of young people across the country. And so it's coming. So they maybe aren't old enough to understand that this is a blip, right? And they are so worried and, they're concerned. They're spending a lot of their college years, making placards and demonstrating and going to the Capitol in Albany and others. So I think that it's not, the work is shifting a little bit. It's important. We have a digital storytelling lab where our students make these short films or use other mediums to tell these stories and get people to care. But the generation that cares is here. And what I think we need to do is marry it with policy and get our young people to run for office, because their concern is there. Our politics has gotten so ugly that I don't judge anybody who doesn't want to be involved. But I start out when I talk to our students, who here might run for Congress someday, or who wants to be on their city council or their school board, and I get 0 hands. But when we talk about the people, the effort that we're making and all the things that our students already know and how difficult it is to get the policymakers on board, when we get done with that conversation and I ask for a show of hands again, I get people that are interested. And that marrying the policy makers with the scientists is, I think, what we have to do.
And she hit I think, right on the source of my optimism. The number I saw is that 88% of students today, college and high school, care deeply about sustainability. And I think maybe part of the answer of how are we thinking differently because of that is really emphasizing the educational opportunities, right? No matter what their major is, how do we prepare them to act on that passion? And I think one of our responsibilities is to help them not focus on the anxiety of the immediate, right? But focus on the solutions that they can help pursue. So I loved your reference to the really driving the solutions. So if we talk in Colorado not about sustainability, but about how do we address the water challenges of the Mountain West, everybody's at the table and everybody's interested, regardless of their political background. So it's that framing the conversation really, I think, is part of what you were saying as well, in terms of what's the challenge, how do we solve it, rather than the political buzzwords is an area where I think we have to shift a little bit. But the students are, not to be corny, right? The students today are the voters of tomorrow, and so that's where by working together and really framing it in policy context and solution context, I think makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and students today are the voters of the day,
I'm going to be politely a little skeptical. If you asked 20 years ago, so this is the political science person to me, if you ask people, do you care about the environment, they'll say yes, the young people. But then if you ask them what's really important to you, I don't see it. With all due respect, I think you have a skewed sample on your campus in terms of environmental interest. Students are interested in a lot of things, right? But if you want to see what animated, they were animated because of a campaign, however you want to phrase it, they were animated by the Palestinian-Gaza situation. There's no similar activism of students around the environment to that issue. There's no similar activism on really any other issue. It's a concern, and it's one of the reasons why I think, I'm glad to hear about the science communication. It's one of the reasons why I think we have to, if we're going to create change, let's not forget, 20 years ago, we did think that movie and the activism was going to make a difference. And if you go back further, we thought Earth Day was going to make a difference. It did make a difference, right, in terms of awareness and so on. But we've plateaued in terms of our reach. And to some degree, that's because it's become partisan. I understand that. But we have to think about how we get more people, because yes, when they're 20 years old, maybe they care about the environment, but they're going to care about getting a job in 5 years. They're going to worry about AI taking away their livelihood. They're going to be worried about the future of American democracy. They're going to be worried about a lot of different things. So we're going to have to figure out how to make sustainability a broader concern about the vitality of our country, the vitality of our communities. It has to be broadened out, or it won't motivate the people who are in the council, who are in the school boards, who then end up in the legislature and end up in Congress ultimately.
So what's your responsibility as the leader? Because I feel like sometimes there's this, well, the students aren't activated. Man, it's the students, like, why don't they get activated around this stuff? And it's not on them, in a sense.
No, it's on us. It's on us to get them.
So how do you all do that? Like, what is your responsibility and role to get students mobilized around your campus in the way that you're reflecting what they already do, but how can you lead them in that effort?
So can I get on a soapbox for a second? So we failed. Ultimately, we failed. I believe our universities, particularly our public universities, and we're all speaking from a public institute, part of our mission was to train people for democracy, to make them civically literate and motivated to participate in the shaping of our country. I like to say that since I'm president of what was born as a normal school, literally we were created to serve democracy, to train teachers when the franchise was expanded, and the belief was that education had to expand if you're going to have voting expand. And so I think our job is to prepare people for democracy on some fundamental level. And we haven't embraced that as part of our mission.
You have not. You're saying you.
I think we, higher education, have not. And we haven't judged our success and failure in those terms. And by the way, the conversation today is misguided in the sense that the value of higher education is framed as the marginal effect on somebody's income. That's important. I don't dismiss that. It is important. But that's completely transformed higher education into a private good instead of thinking about the public good aspects, including the health of the democracy, the health of the environment. And so that has to be part of our responsibility, that we should be encouraging voting, that we should be encouraging active participation, that we should be building skills to have conversations across difference and have substantive engagement, and not just at the presidential or congressional level, but at the local level. And if we don't make that our mission, then all of the substantive things that we want people to accomplish won't be accomplished.
Cindy?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we haven't been successful. We have failed on many aspects, but I want to come back to a couple of ideas that give me hope. And that is that all politics is really local. And I think that as Justin, as you mentioned, right, water is an issue for many of us, especially in the West.
Yes.
We had a wildfire that came within 1.5 miles of our campus in 2020, and if the winds hadn't shifted in the evening, in the midnight or so, we would be rebuilding our campus right now. Blew back the fire so the firefighters could get control of it. That was driven by a multi-year drought. Those things are climate impacts. A couple years ago, we have this great wharf that goes out into the bay, and a big storm ripped the end of the wharf out, and it floated around the bay for several days before it landed on a shore. You know, as we see these climate impacts, we have the opportunity to really motivate collective action with our students and integrating them with our communities. And I wanted to give a shout out at one of the 9:30 sessions today. There's one on academic climate leadership, and it features, among others, a couple of my colleagues from UC Santa Cruz, Alexi Leothold and Chris, and that will talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can think about how we integrate research and teaching and operations and community outreach, those things that I think are really important. So I'm optimistic about the future, but we do have to recognize that we're not where we need to be.
Yeah, so let's talk about then your role. So you gave really concrete examples, and you then need to tell your campus community, hey, this is important, this is part of, and we've embedded it in our strategy. Jonathan, talked about how this is a core, this is why we were created, and you can preach that till the cows come home. I'd love to hear how you all think about this kind of connection between motivating core mission, because that does seem like a president-chancellor function. You always have to be thinking about that. I would like to hear your thoughts on it, not just at your individual institution, but for the sector as a whole. Like, how do you think about speaking for sector priorities? Like, the sector needs to be embedded in part of democracy building. Like,
so
how do you
100% in terms of embracing the mission of not just being jobs programs, and really training, educating students on how to think as a member of a democratic society. That's absolutely critical. Our sector has changed a lot. In the late 40s, I think just under half of the students were at public institutions. Today it's like 73, 74%. Public institutions were founded generally with a different mission than some of our private university friends and peers. When I think about how do we lead our students to do things, right? So we still have had activism on campus around climate. People making posters on non-recycled cardboard. And the way I try to think about it is our students are here wanting to drive change on this topic. And our responsibility as leaders is to help them understand how to do that, right? So marching on our campus, asking the University of Colorado system to divest is one tactic, right? But there are other tactics, right? So partnering with us so that we eliminate all single-use plastic containers on campus is a solution-oriented approach, right? Getting them into programs where their co-curricular activities involve working with the community they came from to solve a community problem, a local problem in sustainability, is not just giving them the chance to do something other than marching around campus with cardboard, but to actually have an impact and see that if they do something that's really meaningful and tangible, they see a change and they learn that there are effective ways of driving change. And so we're looking at how we're in the process of installing our new core curriculum, which is across the entire campus, right, on principles of sustainability. The idea being that our job is to tool them to achieve what they want to do. And so really, this generation can get their hands around, give us some tactical thing to do because they want to have action. And I think the experience, one thing we know from psychology, right, is if you do something and you get a positive reinforcement for it, you're more likely to do it again. So We have massive drives to get students to register to vote. We were very happy when we beat our in-state rival, Colorado State, in a voter registration drive, right? And all the students love the fact that we beat Colorado State. Now that the Colorado State students are going to be really motivated next time to also register to vote. So giving them tangible things within their discipline. So if they're in communications, helping them understand how do you talk about these issues, right? If they're in energy, how do you think about moving beyond coal? So I think we really have to understand that our students are very practical and pragmatic right now, and they want to really put their hands on things that are real.
Yeah. Let's talk about one more theme before we close this out, and that is, and something you just brought up, Justin, which is how do you kind of, in some ways, deal with trade-offs and the reality of decision-making when you're the leader of the institution, and people may not understand the complexity of those decisions that you're making. And Joanie, I was thinking of you and thinking about training future politicians or the people going into public service, and the act of politics is, debate, discussion, a bit of compromise, and figuring out how do you get to a solution that works for multiple parties. And I would wonder in your presidential role, whenever you do have the rah-rah protest that needs to happen probably, elevating an issue, how do you then turn that into, or think about turning that into a real-world solution that you see as the best path forward, given the trade-offs that you might be experiencing? Then we can have a discussion with everybody.
I would encourage our students to take that passion and that protest and turn it into a real action. And we do all those things, with the single use. We have no single use plastics. Our students bring their own like plates and stuff to the dining hall to eat on campus. We have that kind of program. They're gonna leave and just never be comfortable with the waste that the rest of the world has. You have to do all of those things so that they are second nature, right, for people. But then I have a pretty recent example of a trade-off. We have budget issues, and surprise, I know, probably the only one in the room, and we're making progress. And our students have really well-intentioned stands that they want us to take. And we want you to join this group so that we can be sure that our, the things that we sell in our bookstore, they're all sustainably sourced. And all you have to do is pay this money, and then you get this, seal of approval. And they're very upset, the students are with me, that I'm not doing that. But I'm showing them that we can do that. We can go to the manufacturers. We can look at whether they're on the lists of responsible manufacturers. And there are things that we can do, but we can't spend money on, which thing with the limited resources that we have, which really great, well-intentioned idea that you have to move the needle can we do right now? So it's not making a judgment on the ideas. It's just saying, what can we do that will have the broadest impact, that will send you all out as what we call climate warriors into the world? And there are trade-offs, and for us, most of those are, driven by our budget. But I would say we have failed with civics. And I'm inviting the boards of elections, for the parties that we have in New York, to come and make presentations to our students. Voting is extremely important, and I went with our students. We have a golden day where you can register to vote and vote on the same day. And we went out there, and we had a big ESF presence, but you have to take the next step and actually get involved. And so we're having the Board of Elections come and tell students, how do you get your name on the ballot? I'm talking about really basic, you gotta have petitions signed. Well, who writes the petitions, and how many signatures do I need, and who do I file it with? Those are very simple barriers to overcome, that are probably keeping people in this room out of throwing their hats in the ring. So, you know, we have these trade-offs, I have these budget issues, but there's some really great work that we can do while we have the attention of these students on our campus to send them off to, you know, spread the word.
Well, I think that was a really good example of, in your presidential position, you can probably invite those councils in ways that, you know, it's really hard for somebody to know who to contact and will they even respond to my call or my email. But as the president of the university, the chancellor of the university, you have sway and leverage there in ways that can ultimately result in.
And if you just stop and think about that from that lens, through that lens, you know, we are in these wonderful positions where we can do some of those things. What are the things we should be doing, to your question? And how do we share those ideas, I suppose, through your organization?
That's right.
So it's important to know that this work that we're talking about, even just the most basic, getting people to vote, is now becoming a contested area. So if people don't understand, the national survey of voter participation is probably going to cease because the administration basically told Tufts and the partner organization that was a FERPA violation. I don't think that makes any sense. But in many states, polling places on campuses have been closed. So this is an area where I think there's a danger of pre-compliance and acceptance. As I said, I don't think we can negotiate. We exist to serve democracy. It's actually in the higher ed statute that we're supposed to encourage voter participation. So this is a place where I don't think there's any room for a compromise. We are pro-democracy institutions. I don't think there's any Calvin principle issue, since we're in Chicago, of saying we advocate for democracy. I do want to tie off the trade-off question, though, to where you started the day by talking about trust in higher education, because there's a deep tension here, because a concern about the trust is that we're too expensive, that people can't afford to go to college, and I have the budget problems that Joanie talked about, and have made these things like, so we want to green our fleet. Well, we looked at getting buses that are like, they're too expensive. I can't afford those buses, and I can't afford a whole bunch. I can't afford to replace our whole fleet just to take one narrow thing. So we'll do it as we can, but you have to explain to me, how do I justify to a student that the tuition they can barely afford should be $500, $1,000 more a year for us to have a smaller impact on the planet? Now you get into collective action issues and all that. Does their paying $1,000 more in tuition make a difference in the planet? Can I justify that? These are hard challenges for universities to face, and existential ones, and it impacts our ability to maintain the trust that we're being good stewards of public and personal resources. So this is a thorny problem that we're talking about now.
Yeah, and I guess I've always thought that then the president or the chancellor needs to not throw up their hands and say, well, buses are too expensive. And then you go to your elected official and you need to change the rules and incentivize something here so that it makes these things cheaper, AKA like IRA. That happened. You know, that happened because a lot of people wanted to see that happen.
There are other ways to go too. So the bus is a great example, and I love your bookstore story also. So last year, my first year, getting rid of the single-use plastics was as easy as saying, either we have a pouring rights contract that has no single-use plastics, or we'll have no pouring rights contract. Yeah. And it happened essentially overnight by drawing that line. Interestingly, we're in the middle of trying to transition from diesel buses to electric buses. We're in that worst place right now where we have some of each, so we're having to maintain both. And I'll put the number to it. We need about $18 million to go completely electric. Our student government, who collects student fees, and the way we're structured, our student government has control over substantial amount of money. They, of course, would love us to go all electric and get away from diesel, but the conversation with them was, okay, we need $18 million, how much are you in for, right? If you put in something, I'll find a way to match it, right? And we'll go out for philanthropy to try to match it, and give them that, let them understand, like the reality of having to make a trade-off between they have to cover the new roof on the UMC building because they insist that they control that building. Well, there's environmental issues with getting a new roof, which then drives HVAC, and whether they can put solar on it or not, or do they want to buy buses? So I think we are an educational institution, and everything should be a learning opportunity. And they haven't put money into the buses yet. I'm still trying.
Just make one very quick point. I don't want to overlook these headwinds have created a real boom in philanthropy for us. And that is everybody's opportunity right now, is that with the narrative about the funding at the federal level going away, it has encouraged philanthropy, and we are doing a good job with fundraising, and I would take advantage of this moment in time to increase the number of people that are willing to participate.
Well, it sounds like you all are creating, I mean, and part of the leadership is to create the space for those conversations to happen, honest conversations about the trade-offs, honest opportunities that you create because of your positionality that those students or whoever might not have access to, and that you're doing that in a variety of ways. We've got 5 minutes, so I'd love to go down the line, and Cindy, I can start with you, about looking ahead to the next 5 years and what gives you hope. So we always kind of want to end positively and genuinely think about positive things. But we have 1 minute for each of you to say, where's the biggest area of hope in this climate leadership space, or call it whatever you want, a blank leadership space for the future of higher ed?
I'd like to continue on the theme and talk about our students. And so we have campus founded in 1965. We have a long history of activism. And I think harnessing that activism in a way that also leads to advocacy. And so our students are pretty good at advocating with our state legislature. Less so, I'd say, at the federal level. But really thinking about helping them control their narrative as to specific points that are solutions-oriented or are, here's a need, maybe it's electric buses, and how do we advocate for legislation or allocations, and also philanthropy, because students are really compelling, and I think they do a good job of articulating their future and what the needs that they see right now is. So I would think about that, advocacy and activism nexus.
Jonathan?
Look, the most encouraging thing is that our students are not daunted by what they're confronting. I think of higher education generally as fundamentally being an optimistic endeavor. If you didn't think tomorrow could be better than today, it doesn't make any sense to go to school and earn a degree, right? So you have to have a belief in the future. Students are not intimidated by what they're facing. They're not throwing up their hands. I think that's particularly impressive. A majority of my students are first gen, majority minority institution, majority Pell. Most of them have jobs, they're taking care of families, they are juggling a lot. And so they know that they can overcome challenges, and so they're just like, yeah, whatever, like, bring it on. And so that's encouraging, because if they were sort of crawling up into a ball and saying like, well, we're all doomed anyway, then it is hopeless. But they don't seem to feel that way. They want us to give them the opportunities to demonstrate efficacy.
Yeah, it's a little Hippocratic, a little, like, don't do no harm on that claim.
Absolutely.
Don't quash it.
Exactly,
Right.
Don't do that.
Justin, do you want?
Oh, sure. So one, obviously, as students, we've talked quite a bit about that. We haven't really talked about the industry response to the current administration and their pushback on climate. And our experience is that there's still quite a bit of commitment to it. It's just not being spoken of quite as much. But we're seeing it even through the philanthropy side, but also in engagement. And if I could throw just a touch of semi-sarcasm in there, like, for all the wrong reasons, there are good things about oil going over $100 a barrel.
That's true. Yeah.
I drive an electric car,
So do I.
Yeah.
I'm driving right past that $5.
Glass half full kind of guy.
Right. Very optimistic.
Half charged.
I would say what gives me optimism is we haven't really talked about it very much, but we're a really research-intensive doctoral granting institution. And if you could see the research that's come out of ESF and more broadly the SUNY system, you would have a lot of optimism. And what I tell these young students that I have the privilege of being around is the solutions exist. It's the political will. The whole Congress flips over every 2 years. If we could elect people that subscribed to this as an existential threat, we could change things very quickly. the solutions exist. There is so much research going on campuses across the country, and we're prepared for that will. So it gives me tremendous optimism.
Can I mention one other hopeful thing? I mean, it's an important point because we're all blue, purplish, blue places, blue states, as they say. I think Justin's point about quietly doing the work is true at higher education institutions all over the country. And I've been recently in Florida and a couple other places where you wouldn't expect it. The universities are still doing sustainability work. They're still advancing research. They're still educating. And I think higher education generally is and should play this role of keeping the flame alive. If we are in a hurricane that's going to blow through, somebody has to keep the flame alive while the winds are blowing so that it can flourish later. And I think that that's something that is happening at institutions, big and small, public and private. And that's something to be optimistic about, that people aren't running away from this anywhere because it feels inconvenient, to use a word.
As a colleague of our board said, that, we need firefighters and architects, like at the same time, to both put things out and build the next generation of work. Well, I really appreciate, I know as a senior leader, it's really hard to be candid about your thoughts. I think this panel has done that. So we've been successful. Hopefully it's also inspired you to think differently in some ways about the work. And really appreciate your time. Thank you all for paying attention.
Thank you.